Welcome to the decade where ambition went too far. These machines were built smarter, bigger, and wilder than the world was ready for. Too complex, too costly, too risky. They didn't just fail in fields, they nearly destroyed the companies behind them. Number 1. International Harvester 2+2 tractors, 3388, 3588, and 3788. When International Harvester revealed the 2+2 tractors 1979, the machines looked like they had arrived from the future. The 3388, 3588, and 3788 were unlike anything else in the American market. Instead of a conventional frame, they used two full tractor drivetrains joined together, creating a rigid four-wheel drive platform with enormous traction and pulling power. The idea was radical: give farmers the strength of a big articulated tractor while keeping the maneuverability of a row crop machine. On paper, the concept was brilliant. The 2+2 could pull massive implements, handle heavy tillage, and still turn tightly at field ends. It was compact compared to giant articulated machines, yet far more capable than any two-wheel drive tractor. Engineers at International Harvester were proud of it, and they should have been. It was one of the most ambitious tractor designs ever put into production. But brilliance came at a price. The 2+2 was extremely expensive to build. It used two differentials, two drive systems, complex linkages, and unique structural components that could not be shared with other models. Every tractor required more labor, more parts, and more precision than anything IH had built before. The machines were also unfamiliar to dealers and mechanics. Service training lagged behind sales. Many dealerships had never seen a drivetrain like this. Then, reality struck. In 1979, International Harvester was hit by one of the most damaging labor strikes in American industrial history. Production stalled. Inventory dried up. Cash flow collapsed. At the same time, the farm economy began to soften, and farmers became cautious about buying experimental high-dollar machines. The 2+2 tractors entered the market at the worst possible moment. They were expensive. They were complex, and they required a strong, stable corporate structure behind them. IH no longer had that structure. Dealers struggled to explain the machines. Farmers hesitated to risk their livelihoods on something so unconventional. Warranty costs rose as early units revealed quirks that only long-term field use could expose. The program never reached the production scale it needed to justify its development cost. The 2+2 did not single-handedly destroy International Harvester, but it became a symbol of everything going wrong at once: high engineering cost, fragile timing, and a company no longer strong enough to absorb risk. Within a few years, IH would be broken apart. Its agricultural legacy would survive under new ownership, but the company that built the 2+2 would effectively cease to exist. Number 2. Allis-Chalmers 8000 series. By the late 1970s, Allis-Chalmers was fighting for relevance in a rapidly modernizing tractor market. Competitors were introducing quieter cabs, better hydraulics, and higher horsepower. Allis responded with one of the most ambitious tractor families it had ever attempted, what would become the 8000 series. These tractors were designed to be modern in every sense. They offered improved ergonomics, more advanced transmissions, higher output engines, and a level of refinement that far exceeded earlier Allis machines. Internally, the program required massive investment, new tooling, new manufacturing processes, new supplier relationships, new training programs for dealers. From an engineering standpoint, the 8000 series was a triumph. These were serious, capable tractors that could compete directly with the best machines in the world. From a business standpoint, they were terrifying. Allis-Chalmers was not a small company, but it was stretched thin. It operated across power generation, construction equipment, turbines, and agriculture. Each division required capital. Each division faced its own competitive pressures. The farm equipment group did not have the luxury of failure. The 8000 series raised the stakes dramatically. Every tractor carried more cost. Every warranty claim hurt more. Every unsold unit represented a larger chunk of tied-up capital. When the agricultural economy cooled and interest rates climbed, Allis-Chalmers suddenly found itself with expensive machines, slower turnover, and shrinking margins. Dealers reported that while the tractors were impressive, they were harder to sell. Farmers who had weathered decades with simpler machines questioned whether they truly needed such complexity. Some buyers worried about long-term serviceability, others balked at price. Meanwhile, Allis-Chalmers had already committed the money. Factories were tooled, supply chains were in motion. Backing out was impossible. What followed was a slow unraveling. Losses accumulated. Divisions were sold. Eventually, the farm equipment business itself was separated and absorbed by others. The Allis-Chalmers name vanished from new tractors. The 8000 series did not fail as machines. They failed as a business gamble made by a company without the financial armor to survive a misstep. They represent the moment when engineering excellence outpaced corporate resilience. Number 3. Massey Ferguson, MF1100 and MF1135. Massey Ferguson entered the 1970s as one of the most powerful agricultural brands in the world. Through aggressive expansion and acquisition, it had built a global manufacturing empire. New plants, new markets, new product families. The strategy was simple: grow faster than everyone else. The MF1100 and MF1135 embodied that ambition. These were large, powerful tractors designed to compete in the high horsepower segment. They delivered serious pulling power, advanced hydraulics for the era, and the kind of presence that signaled professional farming at scale. In many regions, they became status machines, tractors that said, "This is a modern operation." Technically, they were strong. Farmers appreciated their torque and capability, but beneath the metal was a corporate structure built on debt. Massey Ferguson had financed much of its expansion through borrowing. The business depended on constant sales growth to service its obligations. Every new tractor line was expected not just to succeed, but to succeed quickly and at volume that left no room for error. The MF1100 and 1135 were expensive to build. They required larger components, stronger drivetrains, and more sophisticated assembly processes. They also targeted a narrower slice of the market than smaller utility tractors. When interest rates rose and farm incomes tightened, demand for big-ticket machines slowed. Suddenly, the growth engine stalled. Massey still had factories to feed, workers to pay, and loans to service. Unsold tractors became financial anchors. Margins shrank, cash flow tightened. What had been a confident global empire began to wobble. The tractors themselves did not collapse. The company around them did. By the end of the decade and into the early 1980s, Massey Ferguson entered a period of restructuring and crisis. Plants closed, assets were sold. The company survived, but permanently changed. The MF1100 and 1135 stand as monuments to a dangerous equation. Powerful machines built by a company that had already mortgaged its future. When the market blinked, there was nothing left to absorb the shock. Number 4. Ford 7600 and 7700. In the mid-1970s, Ford's tractor division stood at a crossroads. The brand was respected worldwide for simple, rugged machines that farmers trusted. But the market was changing. Competitors were rolling out tractors with quieter cabs, synchronized transmissions, stronger hydraulics, and more horsepower. Ford could not afford to look outdated. The answer was the new generation of blue tractors, models like the Ford 7600 and 7700. These machines were a leap forward. They introduced modern cab design, more refined gearboxes, higher output engines, and a level of operator comfort that older Ford tractors had never offered. In many regions, they became icons of the late 1970s farm. From an engineering standpoint, they were excellent. They were smoother, more powerful, and more versatile than their predecessors. But they were also far more expensive to build. Ford had historically won by being efficient. Its tractors were simple to manufacture, easy to service, and affordable. The 7600 and 7700 changed that equation. They required new tooling, more precise assembly, and a global parts network capable of supporting more complex systems. Every unit tied up more capital. Every warranty claim cost more. At the same time, Ford Motor Company was under pressure in its automotive business. Fuel crises, regulatory changes, and rising competition were squeezing profits. The tractor division was no longer a hobby. It had to justify itself inside a corporation fighting battles on multiple fronts. The problem was not that the 7600 and 7700 were bad tractors. The problem was that they raised the minimum scale required to stay competitive. Ford's farm equipment arm now needed sustained global volume to justify its investment. When farm purchasing slowed in the late 1970s and early 1980s, that volume became harder to guarantee. Internally, tractors began to look like a distraction from Ford's core automotive mission. The division demanded continuous capital for new generations of machines, each more complex than the last. What had once been a steady, reliable business became a high-stakes manufacturing race against specialist rivals. By the end of the 1980s, Ford made a strategic decision: exit. The tractor business was sold and absorbed into what would become New Holland under Fiat. The machine survived. The blue paint lived on. But Ford itself walked away. The 7600 and 7700 did not fail in the field. They failed in the boardroom. They mocked the moment when tractor engineering became too capital-intensive to fit comfortably inside a general automotive giant. Number 5. Early electronic tractors. In the late 1970s, a quiet revolution began inside tractor cabs. Engineers started experimenting with electronic monitoring systems, small digital displays, sensors that watched engine temperature, oil pressure, and operating hours. The first steps toward what we now call smart machines. To modernize, these systems seem primitive. But in 1978, putting electronics into a farm tractor was radical. Farms were dusty, damp, vibrational. Electrical noise was everywhere. Most dealerships were staffed by mechanics trained on gears, clutches, and hydraulic valves, not circuit boards. Test equipment was rare. Replacement components were expensive. Yet several manufacturers pushed forward. They believed electronics would reduce engine failures, improve efficiency, and differentiate premium models. From an engineering perspective, they were right. These systems were the ancestors of today's precision agriculture. From a business perspective, they were a nightmare. Early electronic modules were fragile. Connectors corroded. Displays failed. Sensors drifted. When something went wrong, tractors often became unusable until a specialist could diagnose the fault. In rural areas, that could mean days or weeks of downtime. Farmers grew frustrated. Dealers grew angry. Warranty claims exploded. Unlike a broken hydraulic hose, a dead electronic module could not be fixed with tools in a barn. It required parts that dealers did not stock and knowledge they had not been taught. Manufacturers were forced to ship components overnight, dispatch specialists, and absorb costs that traditional mechanical failures never generated. For companies already operating on thin margins, this was devastating. Every electronic-equipped tractor carried hidden financial risk. A single failure could erase the profit on the entire machine. Multiply that across hundreds of units, and a promising innovation became a drain on cash. The technology was not wrong. The timing was. Electronics would eventually transform agriculture. But in the 1970s, the ecosystem was unprepared. The service network was mechanical. The farmers were cautious. The components were immature. What should have been a competitive advantage instead became a liability. For weaker manufacturers, the added warranty burden and reputational damage pushed already fragile businesses closer to the edge. This was over-engineering in its purest form, the future built into a world that could not yet support it. Number 6. European high-capacity combines. While American tractor makers chased horsepower, European manufacturers were engaged in a different race, harvesting capacity. The 1970s saw dramatic leaps in combine design, wider headers, faster threshing systems, more aggressive separation technology. Engineers sought to harvest more grain per hour than ever before. Some companies succeeded too well. Smaller European firms, eager to stand out, built combines that were technological marvels. These machines could process enormous volumes of crop, handle difficult conditions, and deliver clean grain at speeds unimaginable a decade earlier. On paper, they were superior to anything else on the market. In practice, they were terrifying investments. A combine is often the most expensive machine on a farm. Buying one is a multi-year financial commitment. Farmers evaluate not only performance but risk. Can it be repaired quickly? Are parts available? Will it still be supported in 10 years? The advanced European combines of the 1970s failed that test. They used proprietary systems, unique belts, custom bearings, specialized drivetrains. When something failed during harvest, repairs could take days. In regions with short harvest windows, that delay could destroy a season. Dealers struggled. Stocking parts for such complex machines tied up enormous capital. Training technicians required time and money. Some dealerships simply refused to carry the models. Sales lagged. Warehouses filled with unsold machines. Development costs remained unpaid. Cash flow collapsed. For large corporations, this would have been painful. For smaller manufacturers, it was fatal. Several firms that bet their futures on high-capacity, ultra-advanced combines disappeared in the consolidation waves of the 1980s. Their machines were not bad. They were simply too much, too soon for an industry that still depended on simplicity and field repairability. These combines illustrate a brutal truth. In agriculture, uptime matters more than theoretical performance. A machine that can harvest twice as fast is worthless if it spends harvest season waiting for a specialized part. Overengineering turned brilliance into fragility, and fragility into extinction. Number 7. Steiger Bearcat and early articulated giants. In the 1970s, horsepower became a form of competition. Bigger fields demanded bigger machines, and manufacturers raced to deliver tractors that could pull enormous implements in a single pass. Steiger, a company built entirely around high-horsepower articulated tractors, stood at the center of this movement. Models like the Steiger Bearcat were awe-inspiring. They were massive, jointed in the middle, and capable of pulling equipment that would tear conventional tractors apart. To farmers working thousands of acres, these machines promised a new scale of productivity. But raw power came with hidden costs. Articulated tractors were expensive to manufacture. Their frames were heavy, their drivetrains oversized, their engines thirsty. They required specialized axles, steering joints, and cooling systems that smaller tractors never needed. Every unit tied up enormous capital before it ever reached a dealer lot. More critically, these tractors demanded a new kind of farmer. They made sense only on very large operations. The customer base was narrow. In boom years, that was fine. In uncertain years, it was deadly. As the decade closed, fuel prices became volatile and interest rates rose. Suddenly, operating a massive articulated tractor felt risky. Financing one became even harder. Farmers who might have upgraded hesitated. Those who already owned them delayed replacement. For companies like Steiger, this was existential. The firm's entire identity revolved around ultra-large machines. It had no small tractor safety net. When demand softened, revenue dropped sharply, but fixed costs remained. The Bearcat and its peers were not flawed machines. They performed exactly as designed, but they represented a future that depended on continuous expansion and cheap capital. When those conditions vanished, the business model cracked. Steiger survived, but only through ownership changes and restructuring. The original company that built those early giants could not remain independent in a world where power alone was no longer enough to guarantee stability. These tractors show how overengineering can be strategic, not mechanical. Building only the biggest, most complex machines ties a company's survival to a narrow slice of the market. When that slice shrinks, there is nowhere to hide. Number 8. John Deere's Titan Combine Program. John Deere entered the 1970s as the most powerful name in American agriculture. Its machines were trusted, its dealer network unmatched. When Deere decided to revolutionize harvesting, it did so on a scale no competitor could match. The result was the Titan series of combines. These machines were enormous, wider, taller, heavier, and far more capable than earlier models. They featured advanced grain handling, higher capacity threshing, and engines designed for relentless duty. Deere aimed to redefine what a combine could be. The engineering succeeded, but the cost was staggering. Factories had to be retooled, supply chains expanded. Dealers required new facilities to service and store machines of such size. Every combine represented a massive financial object moving through the system, from factory floor to farmer's field. For Deere, this was a calculated risk. For the industry, it raised expectations. The Titan program forced competitors to chase scale whether they were ready or not. Smaller firms attempted to answer with large, complex combines of their own, often without Deere's capital reserves or dealer infrastructure. When the farm economy tightened, those firms paid the price. Even Deere felt the strain. The Titan machines sold, but they tied up unprecedented amounts of money. Production planning became more sensitive to demand swings. Mistakes became expensive. A handful of unsold combines could represent millions in immobilized capital. For Deere, the program ultimately succeeded because the company was strong enough to absorb volatility. For others, imitating that level of engineering proved fatal. The Titan series did not destroy Deere. It reshaped the industry in a way that exposed every weaker competitor. It is included here because it demonstrates how over-engineering at the top end can destabilize everyone below it. When one company raises the technological floor, all others must follow or collapse trying. Number 9. Whitefield Boss 4210. When White Farm Equipment introduced the Field Boss 4210 in the mid-1970s, it wasn't just launching a tractor, it was launching a lifeline. White was a young company, born from the collapse and merger of Oliver, Minneapolis Mullen, and Cockshut. It needed a flagship, something bold enough to announce that this new brand could stand beside giants like Deere, IH, and Case. The 4210 was that statement. It was a massive articulated four-wheel drive tractor, over 200 horsepower at a time when that number felt outrageous. It used a powerful Cummins engine, a heavy-duty drivetrain, and a bold square design that made it look like industrial machinery, not a farm tool. On paper, it was everything a growing farm could want. In reality, it was a gamble White could barely afford. The 4210 was expensive to build. Its components were oversized. Its assembly was slow. Its transport and dealer preparation costs were high. Every unit tied up enormous capital before it ever earned a dollar. Worse, it entered a market that was about to tighten. Fuel prices fluctuated. Interest rates rose. Farmers became cautious. The pool of buyers for a 200-plus horsepower articulated tractor was small and shrinking. White needed the Field Boss to sell in volume. It didn't. Dealers struggled to move them. Some loved the power but feared long-term support from a company still proving its stability. Others worried about resale value. Every unsold unit sat on a lot like a silent debt. White had built a machine for a future that arrived late. The tractor itself wasn't bad. It pulled hard. It worked. But it required a strong corporate backbone behind it. White did not yet have that backbone. Within a few years, the company would change hands. Ownership shifted. Strategy narrowed. The dream of becoming a full-line powerhouse faded. The 4210 became a symbol of ambition that outpaced security, a tractor that carried not just steel, but the weight of a company's survival. Number 10. Case 4070 and 1570. Traction King. Case had always been known for rugged machines. In the late 1970s, it decided to dominate the high-horsepower battlefield with the Traction King series. The 4070 and later the 1570 were monsters, articulated, heavy, built to pull anything a farmer dared to hook behind them. These tractors were engineered with brute force philosophy, thick frames, massive axles, industrial-scale components. They looked like they belonged in a quarry. They were incredible machines. They were also incredibly expensive. Every Traction King required more steel, more machining, and more labor than traditional tractors. The driveline components bordered on construction equipment grade. Production costs soared. Case believed size would win. For a moment, it did. But the economics changed. As the 1970s ended, borrowing became harder. Fuel became a concern. Farms stopped expanding at the same pace. The market for giant articulated tractors tightened. Suddenly, a machine designed for endless growth was living in an era of hesitation. Case had invested heavily in the Traction King platform. Tooling, marketing, dealer infrastructure. It needed steady sales to justify the expense. Those sales slowed. The tractors still worked beautifully. But beauty doesn't pay interest. Each unsold 4070 or 1570 represented enormous locked capital. Each warranty repair was costly. Each downturn in demand hit harder because the machines themselves were so expensive to carry. Case survived, but not unchanged. The agricultural division would eventually be absorbed into larger corporate structures. The era of independent dominance faded. The Traction Kings proved a harsh truth: building the strongest machine in the field is meaningless if the market no longer wants to carry its weight. They were brilliant, they were bold, and they almost ended empires. These machines proved one brutal truth: engineering without limits can be fatal. History remembers success, but it never forgets mistakes.